internet, on YouTube. Let me clean my camera. Let me clean it. There we go. It's a little bit more clear. I mean, my camera's not even good quality to begin with, so. Where is that glare coming from? I don't know. Anyways, I just arrived at school, and I wanted to record before I get out. But I would have recorded this video while I'm driving. However, because I'm making these videos public now, my phone mic picks up all the sounds from my car when I'm driving, and it's hard to hear me. So I kind of like the whole vibe of like driving and recording, but in order to do that, I need to buy a mic, and I don't have a mic yet. So we're gonna have to do stationary videos for now. But that's gonna become my vibe because I have a lot of thoughts, and it just kills two birds with one stone while I'm driving to record them. But okay, so if you don't know, hi. If you don't know me, my name is Ura Nechimso. I'm an applied philosopher. Currently, it's also 90 degrees. I'm currently in a PhD program for economics. So philosophy of economics, doctorate of philosophy in economics. But I'm an applied philosopher. I'm interested in different topics, but I primarily use philosophy as a lens to understand things that we experience in the world as human beings for the goal of enjoying life better and making life better for other people. Today, I want to talk about what is economics. So I'm in an economics PhD program primarily because I'm interested in working in the field of economic development for the African continent, but I was an economics major in undergrad, and I loved it from the first class that I ever took, which is really interesting because Econ 101 for a lot of people in my undergrad was like a weeder class, and people literally hated it. We didn't have a finance or a business undergrad degree, so if people wanted to go in that field of work, they had to take economics. So economics kind of was just like a class that you have to take to actually get to the degree for the career that you want. And for me, I took economics because I was like curious about economics. My dad in high school, he told me that he thinks I would really enjoy and be good at economics, but I had no idea what economics was when I was in high school. So I took it because I was interested in learning about what it was, and I fell in love. I actually went into undergrad as a neuroscience major, or a neuroscience hopeful major, but I ended up taking economics 101 before neuro 101 because the neuro classes fill up really quickly. And I loved econ. I took my neuro class the next semester. Didn't enjoy the class. I love neuroscience as a topic, but I didn't really enjoy the class and some of the things that we would be focusing on. But I loved everything. I loved everything about economics. It was like a culmination of all the subjects that I loved in grade school and what exactly I loved about them. So things that I loved, and I'm gonna wrap this up before I start talking. Wrap this up quickly so that I can start talking about what economics is. But the things that I loved in grade school were things like math, chemistry, language. Math, chemistry, language. There was another class. I'm not remembering. There was one that was like just in my head. Math, chemistry, language, science, generally speaking, psychology, and I think those were like my favorite classes. Math was consistently my favorite class from elementary school through to high school. And the reason why I loved those classes is because they're problem-solving classes. Math, chemistry, and language classes, all in my brain were exactly the same thing. Like, they were exactly the same thing. You're given rules, you're given rules, and you're given certain objects. You're given how these objects interact with each other based on these rules, and what you need to do is continue to build on top of them and build more complicated and intricate things. So math, the objects are numbers, and the rules are things like addition, subtraction, multiplication, power, and all the other things that we learn. Chemistry, you're given elements, you're given the qualities of these elements, and then how they interact with each other through bonds. Essentially, those are the rules. Language, you're given words, and you're given words, and you're given the rules of sentence structure, syntax, semantics, and all this stuff. And then you combine all of these things together to build sentences, paragraphs, like understand things, explain your logic. I loved all of that. Now, with psychology, I didn't start taking psychology until, I took language from elementary school, so language and math always. Chemistry started in middle school. I only took one psychology class and I took it in high school, but I became interested in psychology from middle school. And I loved my psychology class because I love human beings and I love understanding people. It's kind of like, for me, it's kind of the same thing, like the way that it works in my brain. It's like, it's hot in here. Turn on the AC. What are like the basic fundamentals, building blocks of human beings, and then how do those things interact with each other to make a human being and the human experiences and the way human beings like express themselves. Ooh, excuse me. Then another thing that I was really interested in middle school was philosophy. In the summers, I did this summer program called Center for Talented Youth at Johns Hopkins, and two of the classes that I took were logic classes. My first class was on numbers. My second class was on, over the years, my second class was on science and technology. My third class was on inductive and deductive reasoning, the first logic class. And my fourth class was logic and reasoning. And we did a lot more explicit philosophy in that class because it was a college level class. And I absolutely fell in love with philosophy from then forward. Logic is the exact same thing. Maybe the thing that I love about all of these different topics is logic. You have an object, you have rules about how things relate with one another, and you use that to build literally any and everything. So when I came to economics, I saw all of these things, I saw all of these things in economics. I saw philosophy, I saw logic, and I saw human beings in them. And I was like, this is me. This is everything that I loved about learning and all the subjects that I loved and exactly what it is that I loved about them. And so that's how I fell in love with economics. You can approach it from a philosophical perspective. You can approach it from a logical perspective. You can approach it from a human experience perspective. But all of it, these are just all the things that I love to do, and I just love how integrative of a subject it is. If you approach it in that way, you can approach economics from a siloed perspective, and most professionals tend to approach it from the logic perspective, but it ultimately is an integrated field because it is fundamentally focused on human beings and how human beings organize themselves within the world and within society. So, 8 minutes in, what exactly is economics? I think it's a little bit hard to synthesize this, and I always like to caveat this. I'm giving my perspective on this. I am one person out of millions of people who are economists who work in the field of economics, and this is my perspective on it. However, I am aligned with, I would say, maybe not millions, but I am aligned with thousands of people on my perspective of economics. So while I am one person, there are plenty of other people who share this perspective. So I'm providing you one out of many perspectives on what economics is, what I believe is probably the most integrated and comprehensive and holistic perspective of what it is. Excuse me. I do that a lot because I'm just constantly congested. When I watch my videos back, I'm like, that's not good for the videos, but it's hard to speak. Excuse me. It's hard to speak when there's mucus in my throat. Okay. So, my understanding of what economics is, fundamentally, economics is a tool. Sorry, give me a second. Keep getting notifications. I'm just going to do not disturb. Economics is a tool for analyzing and understanding how human beings use limited means to achieve the ends that they want. The fundamental question of economics is, I had it all in my brain and now I'm distracted. The fundamental question of economics is, how do human beings achieve certain ends given limited means to achieve those ends? Some assumptions underlying that fundamental question is human beings have insatiable desires, meaning there are an infinite amount of things that we want. However, the resources available to us to fill those desires are limited. They are finite. Infinite desires, finite resources. How do human beings then use those finite resources to achieve those infinite desires? That process and understanding that process is economics, and economics is the tool that we use to understand that process. Now, because it's a tool, you can understand it from a philosophical perspective and apply it to multiple different things. Typically, in the field of economics, it is applied to the material realm in terms of how do human beings, the material realm, and I would also say the survival realm, in terms of how do human beings get the things that they need to survive at a most basic level. Like when you're being taught like the history of like economics, not as a field but in terms of like a social institution, you typically start at human beings trying to meet their basic needs, and then you build from there, like kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But because it is a tool for understanding how we use limited resources to meet infinite needs, we can't deny that we as human beings don't only have material needs or material desires. We also have non-material desires, metaphysical desires, emotional, psychological desires. Some of them which are tied to our material desires and some of them which are not. Things like love are not. Things like safety are both. Things like belonging can be both, because human beings are also material and belonging is kind of tied to material things like that. So, okay, where was I going with that? So typically economics tends to focus on the material and survival aspect of these things, economics as a field. So that's how we get, like, you get focuses on things like GDP, production, businesses, material resources. It really tends to focus on that, and I'm not saying that's important. That is extremely important, and I'm very interested in that side of economics as well, because I'm also very interested in entrepreneurship and development. Development fundamentally is about how like people in certain regions and certain communities can use the limited resources that they have to meet their material needs for survival and get past that survival to like meet other desires that they have. So I'm very interested in that, but the reason why I'm highlighting the philosophical side of economics that can be applied to metaphysics and non-material needs is because that's not as talked about in the field of economics, because using economics to understand the field of economics, the value of economics to society really does lie in its ability to explain, analyze, and understand how material survival needs are met. As in, like, the rest of society, people that are outside of economics as a field value it in society for its ability to explain these things. But fundamentally, in and of itself, it is not limited to that realm, and you can also use it to understand all of these other things that are interesting. And I want to start bringing an economic perspective to other things. So I have a video up already about the economics of worldviews, basically taking this economic perspective of we have ends and we have limited means to achieve an end, and how do we take, okay, so in a worldview perspective, worldviews help us to navigate the world in a simple way where we don't have to do too much like analysis and too much observation, because our brain is limited in how much it can process and like process information. And because of that limitation of our brains and the focus that our brains are kind of designed for, we come up with worldviews to kind of give us shortcuts on how to analyze and navigate the world. And those shortcuts are oriented towards certain ends depending on a whole bunch of different things: how old you are, what country you live in, what society and culture you come from, a whole bunch of different things. And worldview serves as one of the shortcuts to achieve those ends. But where do we get our worldviews from? Like, what resources do we have available to build our worldview to achieve those ends? So that's like kind of an economic approach to understanding worldviews. What is another? Yeah, I think I'm just gonna like make more videos about like, okay, economic understanding of this, economic approach to that. And there was something else I wanted to say. Yeah, that's the like fundamental economic philosophy. And from that foundation, we start building all of these other things, and you get all of these other philosophies, again, typically around meeting material needs for survival. within the context of a society. I will also say that within the context of living around other people, because economics can also be applied to someone that's living on their own in the wilderness somewhere. But typically, again, the value of economics to society is how it explains social phenomena, and so that's where a lot of the focus tends to go towards. But yeah, if you're interested in like anything like related to economics, or you want to understand like how an economic worldview can explain a certain topic, just let me know, and I'm more than happy to try and do that for you. Okay, so I'm trying to think of like what are the basic tools that we have for economics. So some of the basic tools that we have available in this analytical project is analyzing. Because it's primarily about how we use limited resources. Economics doesn't tend to focus on the ends that people are pursuing, which I think is a problem. Specifically because the ends we are pursuing really has an effect on how resources are used and how they are distributed and how they are understood. And a big like understanding in economics is trade-offs or opportunity costs. You are using this resource to achieve this end when it could be used for something else. But if we're not analyzing the ends that we are pursuing, we just take them as given. We take the use of resources as given, not realizing that the ends in and of themselves can change. And when an end changes, the use of a resource also changes. So because we primarily focus on the resources that are being used, we typically, and they're limited and there are infinite desires, we typically focus on trade-offs and how we make decisions about the resources that we have, whether as individuals or as a collective, or as individuals interacting with other individuals in a collective kind of group something. So some of those concepts are opportunity costs, cost benefit analysis, which is basically trade-offs in like a simplified way. I'm trying to think of some, like other. I should start like writing down notes for these videos with my brain. I'm trying to like remember everything at once. But yeah, okay. So I'm trying to think of what other tools that we have. But honestly, that's like the most fundamental tool, is how you make a decision about using a certain resource given a certain end. And yeah, I think another important thing is how human beings within a collective organize themselves for the use of resources, because we are human beings in a collective, and the most immediate use and value of economics is within that context. So things, and a really important concept is game theory. Basically the interaction of human beings within a collective as they are pursuing certain ends given the shared limited resources that they have available to them. Okay, what other? Oh, maximization. Really important concept. So given, like, we assume that people maximize what we call a utility, but basically you don't just have one end that you're trying to achieve. You have multiple different ends that you are trying to achieve. You have multiple different ends, but you have this finite amount of resources to achieve those multiple different ends. And every person has a weight that they place on each of these ends. So an example could be, one of my ends could be happiness, another one could be comfort, another one could be money, another one could be health. So I have all like these: happiness, comfort, money, and health. I have these 4 different ends. But because I have limited resources to achieve those 4 different ends, I need to figure out how I am going to allocate my resources to achieve those ends. And when it comes to that, I have to put a weight on each of those ends that helps me determine how much of my resources are going to be allocated across those things. So in this case, we are taking the ends as given and the resources that we have available to us as given. And the thing that we need to understand is the weighting of each of those ends, so that the resources that we have can be allocated to those things. So resources could be like time, skills that we have, money that we have available to us, networks, networks and relationships or people that we have in our proximity. What else? There was another one. Energy. That wasn't the one I was thinking of. And what we call endowments, which is things that we already have. So an endowment that I have is my headphones. Something that I own that I don't have to buy. And so basically how we use those things to meet those ends. And okay, so there's that. And then another important concept specifically for the way that our economy is structured is the market and exchange. So again, because the fundamental question is how do people meet certain ends given a limited amount of resources, we're not going to assume that the way that people will always do that is by engaging in exchange with other people. Exchange is one of the ways that somebody can do that. Another way somebody can do that is just going and taking from somebody else. Another way that someone can do that is, or a collective of people can do that, is centralized distribution of all of the resources of the collective. So exchange in what we call a market setting is one of the ways in which somebody can achieve those ends. Because remember, we have resources, we have ends. How do we get the resources to the ends? Economics is what explains that in-between process. And exchange is only one of the ways that explains that in-between process, or one of the ways that that in-between process can happen. Because I tend to prefer exchange, and that is the economy and the society that we live in, it's really important to understand the fundamentals of exchange as well. So the fundamentals of exchange are you have something and I have something. I probably have something that you want, and you probably have something that I want. So instead of us just going to each other and taking what we want from the other person, we realize that we both have something that each other wants, and so we trade it. We exchange the things that we have. So understanding that mechanism of exchange and what leads people into that process of exchange. And okay, so beyond those basic concepts, I wish I could summarize them again, but I don't have notes and I'm literally just speaking off the dome and I forgot. But beyond those basic concepts, I think economics provides a really good framework for personal decision making in your life. When I was in undergrad, the department explained economics as the science of decisions. When I was in undergrad, I explained it as the science of resource allocation. But I think they take it to a more fundamental level, because if you're allocating resources, ultimately it is about how you make that decision, or the decisions that you make in allocating resources. I still think allocating resources is probably better for people to understand. But the science of decisions is also something that makes sense. And because it is a science of decision making, it can be applied to personal decisions that we have to face every single day. It gives you a framework for understanding how to make decisions, how to be aware of what it is you are actually going after, because I think we make decisions and we're not aware of some of the things that we are pursuing that inform the decisions that we're making. So it can help you be aware of what it is you are actually going after, not what you tell yourself you're pursuing, but what it is you are actually pursuing in the actions that you take. In economics, we call that revealed preference. Not what people say that they like and they want, but what they actually want, revealed by what it is that they do. So it can help you be more aware of what it is that you actually want and what it is that you're actually chasing. It can help you be more aware of what it is you actually have available to you to achieve those things, and not what you think is available to you. So something that I like to use as a licensed financial advisor and someone who studied this and has developed a course around personal finance is a lot of people in our society, I think just because of the way our society is structured, default to spending money to achieve the things that they want to achieve, not realizing that money is not the only resource that they have to achieve the things that they want. You can develop your own skills, you can build networks, and you can use your money. These three things are the primary things that you have to achieving certain ends that are outside of your endowments. So Economics helps you expand your understanding of what it actually is that you have available to you and not limit yourself to certain things to achieve certain ends. Because when you're doing economic analysis, you have to take into account what are all of the actual resources available to me and how do I allocate all of those things towards all of these different ends. Because if you're using, for this example, if you're using money to go and buy, let's say, McDonald's, you're then not using that money to, like, let's say, save up for retirement or a house or a car. That is a trade-off that you're making, and that money could be better allocated towards something in the future than allocating it towards food right now because you have food at home. But you don't realize that you're not just maximizing for you're not maximizing your decisions for food, you're also maximizing your decisions for comfort and for convenience. Because if you weren't maximizing for comfort and convenience and just for food, you would not spend money to go and buy food at McDonald's. You would just go home and eat. But it's convenient to just go and spend money at McDonald's if you're already out or if you don't feel like cooking. And it's comfort in terms of like what you want to eat in the moment. So it then reveals to you, oh, what is it that I'm actually maximizing in this moment? Because there's another way for me to achieve eating food, but I'm not making that decision. So why am I making this decision instead? So things like that. And I want to bring that perspective to people because I genuinely think taking an economic perspective on your life and on the decision that you're making can make you a much more intentional person and can put you in a little bit more control of yourself, how you feel about things, the decision that you make, and not feel like you're kind of just going about your life doing things. So I said a lot. I hope it made sense. I'm going to be making more videos about this just on things that I find interesting, but if there are certain things that you want me to cover in terms of the economic perspective or economic philosophy or any of those things, just drop it down in the comments. Like I said, economics is wide ranging, so there's a lot of different things that I am very open to talking about. But until the next time, thanks for stopping by.